Thank you for joining us for this discussion as we celebrate 25 years of the Digital Leadership Report. And in this particular session, we're going to be talking about business, or more specifically, the impact of technology on business. And to help me do that, we've got two guests. Annett, I'll make sure I get this right, Head of Government Relations and Communications, to give it the full title, for Accelerate Estonia.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you. And Mauro Cozzi, the CEO of Emitwise, a company that believes in profitable decarbonisation.
Thank you for having me.
Look, let's start right there, because one of the most, I suppose, alarming statistics to come out of this year's Digital Leadership Report, just under half of all surveyed digital leaders said that their organisation had no plan to reach net zero. Does that represent a failure of leadership or regulation?
Yeah, I mean both, unequivocally. At the end of the day, we have all, the UK, Europe, we've signed up to the Paris Agreement. We've said we're going to decarbonize our countries to avoid the worst of climate change, and ultimately businesses need to follow suit. And it's a failure in leadership because we know that it's doable. There's pioneering companies like the Unilevers of the world that have shown that they can profit from decarbonizing and meet these targets. So it's possible, it's profitable, we should be doing it. That's why it's a failure from leadership. And it's a failure from regulators because ultimately, hey, we've said that we're going to do this. So we need to hold our businesses to account to the same targets that we've committed to as countries at the end of the day.
I think the actual statistic is 46%. Why do you think it is that those businesses don't have those plans in place? I mean, because it would appear to be something that everyone individually agrees is an important priority.
Yeah, it's tough. And look, we all run businesses, we operate in businesses, we know what it's like to wake up, you look at your emails, you've got 10 competing priorities, and at the end of the day, if a client isn't going to stop using you because of this, then you probably won't prioritize it, right? And that is why it's so important for regulation to step in and help create the right subsidies, the right environment, the right constraints for businesses to ultimately put this at the top of the priority list, which is where it needs to be at the end of the day.
You're working with Estonian startups. I can sometimes be a little bit, I suppose, introspective in thinking about the UK tech sector. But is this something that you're seeing as a groundswell, or are organisations rather in Estonia beginning to take this to heart, or is it something that's not really on their agenda?
I think it becomes more and more essential as well for us and our companies as well. And at Accelerate Estonia, we're exactly working with companies that are either facing legal obstacles or in order to run their innovation, or also like the sustainability goals, that side, so that we also can help to create these new regulations. So especially for the regulational side, that we want to make sure that it supports the sustainability goals as well, especially when you think about like these companies that are coming to the market for that kind of innovation, and really supporting that the regulation would be there to, force these companies to make that steps. Because, if you just give a company a chance, whether you focus on their just how well they are doing economically side, but also when it comes to the future goals as well, we need to make sure that they're aligning also that side.
Now, one of your previous roles within the Estonian government was helping to advise NATO and the UN with regards to cybersecurity. Another part of the survey talks about cyber attacks, and it talks that they are significantly down. So organisations subject to major cyber attack in the last 2 years, down 5 percentage points to 23%. Have those attacks just lost their shock value? What's going on here?
I was actually very surprised when I saw the numbers, and I was like, okay, we actually saw the exact opposite on that side, and especially when we think about the start of the war in Ukraine and how big the numbers were like increasing rapidly, and especially for the companies, because when I was working for the Defense Ministry, I had a visit to the French Minister of Defense, and we were talking about their numbers as well, and they actually said that it has doubled up, the very serious attacks, and we've seen this kind of cases, and I was especially on that side of the table that I actually saw companies reporting about the major big attacks. So that's why I was like a little surprised, but also we can take the statistics positively. So that a lot of companies have put a lot of effort in order to, raise their capabilities in that sector, and maybe they feel like, okay, we're not so affected by these things anymore. So maybe that's like a positive statistics, but I'm not quite sure if that's the right statistics right now that we're seeing, but I feel like it's a lot of pressure that comes for also for private sector companies at the moment.
So we're talking a little bit about net zero. We've touched on cyber attacks. Technology is the answer to many of the challenges that business face, whether that's through some of these technologies that we've been talking about. But is pressure from the boardroom to be wealth generators, empowering our ability to question whether technology should always be used? Is it always the answer? I suppose, given that you believe in profitable decarbonisation, maybe you'd say yes, but not always.
Yes, but I was recently at a conference where the chief procurement officer of a very, very large Fortune 500 company said something I thought was really smart. She said, you know, AI is great, but we sometimes just need a little bit more human intelligence. And I think that's so true. I think, another great thing I heard in the same conference was ChatGPT is not an AI strategy. And I think that's often what the relationship between the boardroom and management teams get wrong. It's we get really excited about these trends, and for good reason, right? We've seen it before with the internet. At the end of the day, the internet was a very exciting technology, and now look at us today. We cannot live without the internet. And I think AI and all of these new technologies, for us in our world of helping companies decarbonize, the power of machine learning is that before only companies that had 10,000 sustainability experts could decarbonize. Now anybody with access to the internet can figure out how to decarbonize their business. So I think absolutely technology is a key part of the equation, but without actually thinking about how you're implementing it, then you're not going to get anywhere. We need human intelligence.
Look, another point here from the survey, and I'll refer to notes to get this right, but in 2021, 60% of leaders surveyed expected an increase in budget. This year, that number is now less than half, so 45%. Respondents tell us that there was an overinvestment in technology in people during the pandemic. With some seeing investment in AI and quantum as a way of staying ahead of the curve or the competition, is framing previous year's expenditure as overinvestment a wise idea?
If you ask from an Estonian that if investing to technology it's too much or you're over-investing this, the answer is always no. You can't over-invest to technology. It's something that really, really matters to us. We're coming. I come from a country where everything functions online and like everything is based on technology. So for us, it's like the main thing, obviously. And I feel like from the company's perspective as well, like when you actually bring new innovation and technology as well on the market, you're actually staying into competition. Like so also at the moment that we're looking at, I mean, outside of the European Union as well, like when we see the other countries, that how much of an investment they're making into the research of AI technologies or the deep tech and everything, they're going to be way ahead of us if we're not going to step up our game. And I think this is something that we should be very afraid of. If you just compare it to the investments when it comes to the US market and even China, in a way, it's just like how much they are investing in order to really level up their game there, and we're somewhere lagging behind. And I feel like you can't overinvest more there, because like that's the sector that is going to shape the game in the future.
And I suppose decarbonisation relies on continued investment. If we go backwards, then we're going to go backwards on those goals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think the idea of qualifying it as an overinvestment is ridiculous. If you think about it, what we did in the pandemic is we showed that entire businesses can change a paradigm in a matter of weeks. Companies that would have previously said, there's no chance I can run my workforce over Teams or Zoom or whatever, all of a sudden they were like, well, actually there's a chance because we have to do it and there's no other way we'll run our business. And the same concept applies to sustainability. I so often hear that there's no chance I can be net zero. I manufacture physical products, and I promise you there's a chance, right? So it is not overinvestment, not in my opinion.
Now, we've touched briefly at various points on regulation. And the DLR brings up the point that 61% feel AI needs greater regulation, but worry it won't be effective. Now, originally when I wrote these questions, I said, okay, so what are the first steps towards responsible regulation? Let's scrap that for a minute and just say, what happens if we don't regulate?
Then things can get very messy, because also when I usually talk about AI, when I have conversations about AI, I always ask one question of the partner I have this conversation, and I'm always like, can you put AI on a level from threat to opportunities? Where would you put AI on that scale there? And then usually people are like, it's both sides, but if you don't regulate, then it's a threat. The threat level is very high up there. But if you do regulate, but enough, not too much, then you can put this somewhere in the middle, like I said. It can still cause some of the threats, but also a lot of opportunities that we can use from the AI. So that's why actually it was positive that the EU came out with the AI regulations last year, but it was, I think, still a little bit too late, because a lot has happened in the last 2 years that we were discussing about like how this regulation should look like. But definitely when it comes to the AI and how to do that better, my kind of of, I would say, suggestions there would be also to include the private sector companies into the discussions, because what we see too many times, and that's why we're special in Estonia, so that when we do regulations, we always like to have all these kind of counterparts on a table that are actually the company owners of AI companies, so that they can tell us what's actually happening in the market, how we could help them, what kind of regulations do they need, and also what kind of threats they feel like they are afraid of in a way. So I feel like the best way to approach that would be always include as many counterparts on the table as possible, and at the same time, of course, also when it comes to the awareness side, I feel there's very little awareness about the AI technology, especially in the public sector. Our policymakers, I know the policymakers who are regulating the AI, and their knowledge, it's not very. so it very much worries me. It's just like, and what we have done together with some of the universities is that we have actually provided free AI courses to both the policymakers and the user citizens, so they can do the basis of the AI and really understand. Because if you have a conversation about AI with somebody, it's also like they don't actually dare say, "I'm so afraid of this, and it's going to ruin everything." And you're like, "Can you explain me? How do you actually even define AI? Or what can you, there's a lot of discussions about this. So that's my just kind of suggestion. Try to educate people first, and especially the policymakers who are going to make decisions how the AI regulations are going to look like.
Look, Annett's come up with some suggestions there, but it almost brings it full circle back to that initial point, that original question. Regulation hasn't worked where it comes to net zero. If we're in a mess without regulation, if policymakers need educating, building on Annett's points, what do you think we need to do to make sure that we do get responsible regulation that actually frames technology in a way that it's positive for business?
Yeah, actually, that's a great closing the loop, right? Because I was thinking while you were chatting that it comes down to accountability. And the regulation that's coming out in sustainability is all around being able to hold organizations accountable for their environmental impact, having transparency of what is your carbon footprint, how are you meeting the targets that you're telling to the public that you're working towards, so we can hold you accountable. And I think in AI, we need the same thing. There's some obvious concepts like if your car is driving itself, are you accountable if it kills somebody, or is the car company accountable? And then if you extrapolate that to if you had artificial general intelligence that was running itself, then who's accountable? Is it the creator of that AI? And I think regulation should focus on accountability, and everything else follows from that. That's what I would say, Liv.
Well, look, Mauro, Annett, thank you for taking the time and talking through some of those big challenges for business and helping us to celebrate the 25 years of our Digital Leadership Report.
Thank you.
Thank you.